There's a phrase we hear a lot when it comes to incarceration. He did the crime, so he did the time. But what we don't talk about is quietly did the time with him or her, the kids, parents, the partner, neighborhood. Incarceration doesn't just lock up individuals. It casts a shadow that stretches across generations. Curious about breaking cycle. We can't just focus on punishment. We have to talk about healing, community, and responsibility. We have to do that collectively. So today's episode is um, an episode that we may have covered, but we're going to get it more in depth with. It's about generational incarceration, not just how it happens, how we stop it. Welcome to the Conviction. Now, we have to first understand intergenerational trauma. We have to understand that because it is one of the determining factors of like incarceration period, especially when it comes to generational effects. When we talk about it, the conversation usually stops at the individual. He went to prison, she caught a case, they did their time. But the truth is incarceration doesn't stay contained within prison walls. It tends to spill over quietly, slowly into families, homes, and eventually entire bloodline. That's where intergenerational trauma comes in. Now, it's a subject that a lot of people don't talk about, but it's that trauma that doesn't always have a name. It's passed down through behaviors. It's passed down through fears and survival strategy. Parent goes away, and suddenly a child learns how to grow up faster than they should. They learn how to read moves. They learn how to be an adult before they should, how to brace for disappointment, how to stop asking questions because the answers either hurt or they never come. I've seen families, and I was a part of a family where incarceration wasn't just an event, but it became a part of the family story. Not because anyone wanted that legacy, but because no one ever helped to interrupt that legacy. The financial strain first. That's what happens first, right? One income gone, the legal fees start piling up, rent falling behind, then the emotional distance, the phone calls that feel awkward, especially when a part of me have moved on, but still have some type of loyalty to someone that pretty much cannot do anything for them financially or physically, or just having a presence is gone. Then there are the visits that are both comforting but both painful. I can remember when I was locked up, I loved when my kids came, but I also hated when my kids came because we had to get separated at the end. Children who don't know how to explain why their parents aren't around don't deserve that, right? So here's the part we don't talk about enough, and a lot of people don't. Kids internalize all of it: the absence, the silence, the shame. They carry it into their classrooms, the friendships they form, and eventually into adulthood. Now, research shows that children with incarcerated parents face higher risk of anxiety, depression, academic struggles, and later involvement with the justice system themselves. But numbers don't capture the lived experience. Just because the numbers say that, what about what they actually experience, like those emotions? What does it feel like to wonder if you're next? What does it feel like to distrust or you don't like systems that took someone away from you? What does it feel like to normalize survival instead of stability? Trauma doesn't magically end when the sentence does. And if it's not acknowledged, if it's not healed, it gets passed down like an unspoken inheritance. And when we ignore that reality, we mistake generational pain or personal failure. Now, this show isn't about making excuses, never has been. It's about telling the full truth because you can't break a cycle you refuse to name. You cannot break a cycle that you refuse to name, right? So let's get to the root of it all. What's the root of the cycle? We can probably have another episode about this, but because it's a continuous cycle, man. It's something that happens all the time. Because if we're being honest, incarceration doesn't usually start with a bad decision. It starts with a couple of bad conditions. Okay. If we want to just be honest, it don't start with someone saying, hey, look, I'm going to go break the law. It starts with the environment that had that person believe that it's okay to break the law. It starts with bad conditions. Long before someone gets charged, there's often a pattern already in motion. Maybe it's poverty that limits choices, schools that are underfunded or overcrowded, neighborhoods where resources are scarce but police presence is heavy, communities that are watched closely but invested in lightly. That's the root of the cycle. When we talk a lot about like personal responsibility, and that matters. Don't get me wrong. I'm a full-fledged member of personal responsibility, especially after you've been through this. But many of these cycles happen when you're children. You cannot hold children accountable for the conditions that they are in. When people always talk about the environment versus, the choice versus environment argument, right? Right. There's always a like personal choice, and then maybe it's the environment. No, children should never be held accountable for the environments that they are raised in. Right. That's when other people get into, and I'm not saying other people in a negative light because you're entitled to believe what you believe, but there's a certain segment of society that believes like, hey, you're basically just cursed. Right. We talk a lot about personal responsibility, and that matters. It does matter. But responsibility doesn't exist in a vacuum. When entire communities are stripped of opportunity, the margin for error gets a little bit thinner. Right? One mistake, one bad day, one wrong influence, and suddenly the system steps in, not to support, but they step in to punish you. Over time, community disinvestment becomes normalized. People just don't want to go in those communities. Recreation centers are closed. After school programs disappear. Job training dried up. Mental health services. What is mental health services? How many hoods got mental health services? Mental health for a lot of people in the hood is a luxury instead of a standard. And then we turn around and we criminalize the very outcomes that those conditions produced. The school to prison pipelines are clear examples. Kids who struggle academically or emotionally aren't met with counseling or mentorship. They're met with suspensions, expulsions, and labels. They're the problem child. They're the disruptive children. They're not really motivated. They're unmotivated. And those labels follow them, shaping how teachers see them, how police interact with them, and eventually how courts treat them. Right? So let's be clear. This doesn't affect everyone equally. Certain communities feel the weight a little bit heavier. Disciplinary policies, zero tolerance rules, and aggressive policing sometimes funnel young people into the justice system early, long before they've had a fair shot at what stability even means. Right? What's frustrating is that none of this is accidental. We've seen what works. We've seen community programs reduce crime, increase graduation rates, and strengthen families. We've seen all that. But when funding disappears and political priorities shift, the pipeline fills the gap. Then we ask, well, why does this keep happening? Why we keep seeing all these kids run around being disruptive or shooting or not going to school and hurting one another? It keeps happening because we keep addressing symptoms instead of roots. We punish the outcomes instead of repairing those conditions. And when the system is designed to react instead of prevent, generational incarceration becomes almost predictable. It's not surprising. It's not surprising that a lot of black kids are still going to jail. It's not surprising that people of color, teenage people of color, are still killing themselves or killing others. It's not surprising. You can't incarcerate your way out of a lack of opportunity. You can't lock your way up out a lack of opportunity. Until we're willing to invest in communities the same way we invest in cages and police, the cycle is going to stay intact. And that's just my honest take on it. Now, there are some proactive things happening, some little glimmers of hope, but I'm going to remain overly optimistic because if incarceration is fueled by conditions, then prevention has to start there too. Not after someone gets locked up, not after a family is already fractured. I'm talking about before the crisis ever reaches the courtroom, right? How do we do that? This is where proactive community solutions come in. Some of the most effective work happening today doesn't involve police or prisoners or prisons at all. It involves mentors just showing up early. Community organizations, like One More Question. Community organizations like Teens on Point. They're paying attention to warning signs others ignore. These are programs, they offer programs that step in when a young person is struggling academically, emotionally, or socially before that struggle turns into a charge. Organizations like Marriott, right here in Atlanta, Georgia, making a difference in our community. I mean, the acronym says it all, right? We got other people here in the city and abroad, like even in other states. Green Builders Foundation. They're doing things to change the narrative. The shift is simple, but also powerful. Stop reacting to harm and start preventing it. Mentorship is one of the strongest tools we have. When people, especially young people, are connected to consistent, trustworthy adults, everything changes. Someone to check grades, someone to challenge excuses, someone just to model what accountability and stability look like. Not perfection, real life. I mean, they're going to see you like you might have a bad day, but they're going to see the consistent reaction to that bad day that you have. Opportunity matters just as much as guidance. Skill building programs, like I said, shout out to Teens on Point. Man, Mr. Cooper out there in Jonesboro. Workforce training, entrepreneurship pathways. These aren't just about jobs. They're about dignity. They're about showing people that their future isn't limited to what they've seen or survived. And I'm not even going to get into the foundation, but we should talk about it. Let's talk about foundation. You can't build anything without stability. Housing support, educational access, transportation, childcare, food on the table. These aren't handouts. They're infrastructure. When those systems are in place, families can breathe, parents can focus, young people can imagine something beyond survival mode. But if you don't have all that stuff, it's natural for someone to become survival. What makes these solutions work is proximity. They're basically rooted in the community. They're led by people who understand the culture, the challenges, and the realities on the ground. Not, some outsider guessing what's needed, but neighbors responding to what they actually know. Here's the truth. People don't need to be safe. They need to be supported. And when communities are resourced instead of monitored, hope becomes more than a slogan. It becomes visible, tangible, and repeatable. I say this all the time on this show, man. Prevention doesn't make headlines like punishment. Prevention doesn't make the headlines. They're gonna talk all day about like what punishment is. They're gonna tell you all about the bad stuff. This is what's gonna happen, right? But prevention is never given that same headlines. It's not given the same amount of coverage. And that's what this podcast is about. Because change, it can happen quietly, consistently in generation, but that's only if we're serious about breaking those cycles. This is where that real work begins. Now, what are some of the paths to do that? Please like, subscribe, comment to the Conviction and Fiction podcast, because I want to have a conversation. Because for a long time, justice in this country has been mostly entirely about punishment. Who broke the law? What rules violated? How much time should be served? And that's it. But punishment alone doesn't heal anything. It doesn't repair harm, and it definitely doesn't rebuild community. That's where restorative paths come in. We got to have a path to restoration. Restorative justice asks a set of different questions, like not just what happened, but who was impacted and what does healing actually require. Maybe it's sinners, maybe it's accountability, but it also centers around humanity. It recognizes that harm ripples outward. And if we don't address those ripples, they keep colliding with future generations. That's what's going to continue to happen. In the real, true restorative models, people are encouraged to face the real impact of their actions, not just the sentence attached to them. That means actually, as an offender, you have to acknowledge harm, take responsibility, and actively participate in the repair. It's harder than just sitting in the cell. You can sit in the cell all day. You can sit. You know what? I can remember one of the prisons I had. Somebody would come in, man, and they had like 2 years, a 2-year sentence, whatever. They had split sentences. It's 20, split 5. You have to do 5, then you got to do 20, like finish 15 on probation, but you're gonna do 5 years. And one of the things I used to say is like, man, I got a baby life sentence, bro. Like, I could do 5 years sitting on the shit jack. Restorative justice requires honesty, humility, and growth. And families play a critical role here. Programs that maintain family connection during incarceration through like visitation, counseling, and communication don't just help emotionally, they reduce recidivism. When people stay connected to who they're accountable to, reentry becomes a continuation of responsibility, not a shock to the system, not destroying. Reentry support is another missing piece because too many people are released with conditions, but no real guidance. Restorative approaches, I think, would focus more on reintegration, like employment support, mental health service. I talk about that a lot. Mental health service is like the most important. Peer accountability and even community-based supervision can prioritize success over failure. There are some community circles we talked about and highlighted on previous episodes. If you want to go check them out, they're on YouTube. We just got back into the video space. I know a lot of our listeners and viewers were saying, hey, why can't we see it on YouTube? Because the YouTube algorithm was messing us over. But you can go back and look at some of the community circle conversation that we had or listen to them, because they are one of the most powerful tools in this space. They bring victims, returning citizens, and community members into structured dialogue that allows for understanding that courtrooms can provide. Shout out to the pod movement. They are really big on that. They just had an event, Both Sides of the Gun, which is a community circle. Both sides of the gun. We talked about that. I was there present for the last two, which was great. But they acknowledge, these community circles acknowledge that it's honesty, and it's also going to take work to repair instead of just endless punishment for individuals that commit crime. Restorative justice isn't soft; it's intentional. It demands more than silence and time served. When done right, it breaks cycles by addressing what punishment alone never touches. That's healing, accountability, and community trust. That's what this show is about, guys. If the goal is safer communities and fewer generations trapped in the system, then justice has to do more than punish. Podcasts have to do more than make you laugh. It has to restore. They have to restore. And those paths are like everywhere. I don't know. It's when for a long time it's almost framed around that punishment. Talked about that. Now what I want to get into now is how do we break free? How do we break the generational incarceration for those moments? Like one policy change or is it a powerful story that's going to do it? I think it's about sustained commitment. I think it's about showing up long after the spotlight fades, and it's about recognizing that real change happens at the community level, not just in headlines. That's why local voices matter. Community leaders, grassroots organizations, mentors, and advocates are often the first to see problems and the last to be resourced. They understand the culture, the challenges, and the people because they live there. They're not theorizing solutions. They're actually building them in real time with limited funding and sometimes unlimited responsibility. This podcast exists to amplify that, not as a trend, but as a practice. We believe that breaking cycles requires more than awareness. It requires investment, smarter sentencing that prioritizes rehabilitation over excessive punishment, policies that actually redirect money into education, housing, mental health, and workforce development. How about a justice model that recognizes accountability doesn't have to mean permanent exclusion? That's a novel idea. And even with that being said, policy alone isn't enough. Advocacy has to be paired with action. Support organizations that work with returning citizens, volunteering time, skills, or even just mentorship. Challenging narratives that reduce people to their past instead of recognizing their potential is key to successful reintegration. This isn't about being loud, it's about being consistent. And consistency is what separates conversation from impact. It means, like, I don't know. That's one of the things I always talk about this platform, because I see other stuff going on. That's the lane that this platform stays in. We don't just highlight problems. We sit in them, unpack them, and talk through what it actually takes to move forward. That's, matter of fact, Turning Forward. That's the name of the book. Go check it out. It's on Amazon right now. Turning Forward, The Work Beyond Fear. It's an interactive book where you can actually do exercises and reflect. It's almost like journaling for your reentry process. Go check it out. It's on Amazon. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on any of the comments or any of the videos that you see here. But on this podcast, what we try to do, man, we try to acknowledge harm without exploiting it. We center growth without pretending it's like linear. And we respect that healing is ongoing work and not some like little soundbite. Breaking free from generational incarceration means refusing to pass pain down as an inheritance. It means choosing repair over repetition. It means creating a system, or let's go get system, plural, system, where accountability and opportunity can exist side by side. I don't think that's too big of an ask. This isn't just a justice issue. It's a public health issue, a family issue, a community issue. And the future we're working toward doesn't get built overnight. It's get built through steady effort, honest conversation, and collective responsibility. We want healthier generations. We have to be willing to do the work together. Simple as that. So, breaking those generational incarceration patterns isn't about pointing fingers or chasing viral moments. It's about staying committed to the work when no one's watching. It's about recognizing that healing doesn't happen overnight, that accountability and compassion can coexist, and real change starts in communities long before it reaches policy papers or headlines. This platform, we don't just talk about it. Y'all know the Conviction Fiction podcast. Y'all know me. We don't talk about justice when it's trending. We don't talk about it every day. We talk about it every second, honestly, consistently, and without exploiting the trauma. Because breaking cycles requires more than awareness. It requires action, investment, collective responsibility. So if this conversation resonated with you, don't let it end here. Support community-based organizations that's out there in your community. Mentor where you can. Challenge harmful narratives. And most importantly, stay engaged. Healing is generational. So is change. And together, guess what, guys? We can break that cycle because that's what we're all about. We are changing the narrative. Peace.